Oh, hello there, and thanks for joining Uncomplicated Math today. Today we're going to be looking at how to subtract fractions with unlike denominators. And by the end of this video, you'll know the steps involved when subtracting fractions with different denominators. So let's get started. So in question number 1, we're being asked to subtract the fraction of 1/3 from the fraction of 5/6. So looking over to the right-hand side here under our steps involved, we can see that our first step is to rewrite these fractions with common denominators. And the reason that we're starting out with this step is because currently we can't actually subtract these fractions because we're looking at two entirely different things here. So in order for us to actually subtract these fractions, we need to first rewrite them with a common denominator so that we're subtracting the same thing. So luckily for us in this case, 6 just happens to be a multiple of 3, so we're going to rewrite these fractions down below with a common denominator of 6. And now for our numerators, for our first fraction, we don't have to do anything to the numerator up top because it was already written in 6th. So we're just going to write our 5 up top for the fraction of 5/6. But for our second fraction, we do need to rewrite the numerator up top. We need to keep this fraction equivalent, which means that we need to multiply the numerator by the same thing that we had to multiply our denominator by to get the denominator of 6. Well, in this case, we had to multiply 3 times 2 in order to get 6, so we're going to do the same thing to our numerator up top. And 1 times 2 gives us 2 for 2/6. So now we're going to move on to step number 2, where we're going to subtract these fractions. And now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to write our denominator of 6 because our denominator is not going to change in our answer. It's still in 6th, but we are going to subtract our numerators. And when we subtract 2 from 5, we get 3 for 3/6. Now for our last step, step number 3, we're going to simplify when needed. Now, if you're not being asked to simplify this problem, you could just write the answer of 3/6 for this problem. But for the purposes of this video, we are going to simplify this fraction. And both 6 and 3 are multiples of 3, so we're going to divide both the denominator and the numerator by 3 to simplify this fraction. So when we divide 6 by 3 for our denominator, we get 2, and for the numerator, when we divide 3 by 3, we get 1 for 1/2. So when we take away the fraction of 1/3 from the fraction of 5/6, we get the answer of 1/2 when written in its lowest possible terms. So now we're going to move on to question number 2, where this time we're being asked to subtract the fraction of 1/2 from the fraction of 8/9. So remembering our first step is to rewrite the problem with common denominators, and in this case it's not so simple in terms of finding a common denominator. Now we're going to use the strategy of multiplying these denominators in order to get a common denominator. But if you're unsure of how to do this, or if you're unsure of how to find a common denominator in general, then I encourage you to pause the video and take a look at some of the video links in the description below, where we go over the process of finding common denominators in a lot more detail. So returning back to the problem, we're going to multiply our denominators in order to find common denominators. So we're going to multiply 9 times 2, which we know gives us 18. So we're going to rewrite these fractions down below with a common denominator of 18. Now, just like we did for the second fraction in the first problem, we need to keep these fractions equivalent by multiplying the numerator by the same value that we multiplied our denominator by. And for our first fraction, we multiplied 9 times 2 to get 18. So we're going to do the same thing to our numerator up top. And 8 times 2 gives us 16. Now we're going to do the same thing for our second fraction. We needed to multiply 2 times 9 to get 18, so we're going to multiply the numerator by 9 as well, and 1 times 9 gives us 9. So now we're ready to subtract these fractions. And just like with the first problem, the denominator's value is not going to change in the answer. It's still going to be an 18ths, but we are going to subtract the numerators. And when we subtract 9 from 16, we're left with 7 for 7/18. So now we're going to move on to our last step, which is to simplify when needed. And now in this case, there's no common multiple between 7 and 18 other than 1, so this is already written in its lowest possible terms. So when we subtract 1/2 from 8/9, we get the fraction of 7/18. So hopefully by now you understand the steps involved when subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. Help make math less complicated by smashing those like and subscribe buttons. As always, enjoy today's math journey.